My name is Hinman and I'm here on behalf of Residents For Deamalgamation. Before we start, I'd like to do an acknowledgement to country. We're here on the Gadigal Wangal land of the Eora Nation, and we pay our respects to those people and also the ongoing struggle for justice of all First Nations people. Sovereignty was never ceded. Well, as we know, residents and communities across the state were heartened when New South Wales Labor took its unchanged policy on demerger to the last election. Finally, we thought we'd get a hearing, as Labor said they supported legislative change to make it easier for councils to demerge, where majorities showed they supported such a move. I just want to read you out Labor's policy that it took to the election. It said, New South Wales Labor will not support the forced merger of local councils, nor will it support any forced demerger. New South Wales Labor does not oppose the merger or demerger of councils, but insists that this must be done voluntarily with the clear support of local residents as confirmed through a local plebiscite. Then it says, New South Wales Labor will legislate to put in place independent mechanisms to enable this to occur. So we thought, great, that sounds great. So really this is what this meeting is going to be discussing. Residents for Deamalgamation, as many of you will know, is working with the Demerge New South Wales Alliance, which is a statewide group, which includes campaign and residents groups from all across the state, and is committed from before the election to help Labor put in place amendments to the Local Government Act to make this very thing happen. So tonight we'll be hearing from several speakers about the steps that we can all take in this room to ensure that our call for greater democracy is actually heard. And to kick off tonight, we're delighted to have Dr. Amanda Cohn with us, who's a Greens Upper House member, and she'll give details of the new local democracy bill, which is aimed at ensuring we can do what we've wanted to do in the Inner West for some time, but many other communities also want to do. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you. I'll also start by acknowledging that we're on stolen Gadigal land this evening, and we're about to talk about what's happened with local democracy in the last 7 years, but of course we had governance in this place for 60,000 years. That's really important to acknowledge, and I'll also acknowledge the Wiradjuri people on whose lands I live down in Albury. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of the Local Government Act and why we need to change it, I just wanted to spend 1 minute to remind you all about why we're here and why it actually matters. Local councils run all of the things that make our communities the places that we actually want to live. Libraries, community centres like this, sports facilities, transport, footpaths, libraries. These are the things that make our communities special and unique, and it's so critical that we have a functioning local democracy so that people's voices are actually heard on local councils. But of course, since 2016, that hasn't been the case here or in a significant number of councils across New South Wales. We know the former Liberal National Government forcibly amalgamated councils, and that's widely regarded to have been a bad move. Former ministers from that government have said that it didn't do what it set out to achieve. They said that it was about costs and efficiency, and we know that's not the case. We know that there are forced merged councils who are running less efficiently and at higher cost than they were before, and that councils that were left alone are doing beautifully. The Labor opposition at that time opposed the forced amalgamation, and we'll talk a bit more tonight about where they've ended up. But what we've ended up with is communities across New South Wales, like communities in the Inner West, and Snowy Valleys Council, Armidale Regional Council, Northern Beaches Council, Canterbury Bankstown Council, and many more. I'm not going to list them all, but this is an issue that is red hot in communities across New South Wales who want to have functioning local democracy. The local government minister, who in the new Labor government is Ron Hernig, has said that there's nothing wrong with the Local Government Act It works just fine as it is, and if communities want to demerge, they can. And I think it's really important to start off tonight, and I want to talk about why that is just expressly not true. We know that the Local Government Act, as it stands now, is not working. So there's one council who has done everything absolutely by the book. They've followed all the steps they're supposed to. I'm talking about Cootamundra Council. Their council moved a motion formally supporting deamalgamation. They put a business case to the Boundaries Commission. Their business case was approved. And the local government minister has now said, sorry, we can't do it. It's got to go back to another round of public hearing under a different section of the Act. So it hasn't worked for Cootamundra. It hasn't worked for Inner West. You've already had a vote in 2021 of 62.5%. Yes, I can see it on the posters all around the room. There's clear community will in this community to deamalgamate, and it hasn't happened. And finally, there's the question of costs. The Local Government Act, as it stands, it's open to interpretation of where the cost lies. When I asked the local government minister under his interpretation of the Act who pays for the cost of deamalgamation, and he said, there is no cost, because if council can prove that deamalgamating is cost beneficial, then it's cost beneficial to demerge and there is no cost. We all know that there would be upfront immediate costs associated with deamalgamation, just administrative stuff, splitting back up IT systems and sorting out contracts for staff. There are obviously short-term costs. There are widely ranging estimates of how much that is. I'm sure Brian will probably speak to this when we get to Brian, but it's important for the Act to not only allow demergers to happen, but also be explicit about who bears the costs. So the good news is that it's possible to change the Act. And I've given notice in the New South Wales Parliament to amend the Local Government Act. If you're really into policy and legislations, there are a couple of copies of the draft bill sitting on the table over there, so it's certainly no secret. And what the bill would do is make it clear that if 10% of people in a former area have a petition to ask for a plebiscite to demerge, the Electoral Commission has to have a formal plebiscite. If that plebiscite is successful, if more than 50% of people in that former council area ask to demerge, it's binding on the minister, and they actually have to just do it. That bill... Thank you. And the bill would also make sure that those councils like Cootamundra and others that are caught up in the current broken process also get hoovered up, and the minister has to just demerge them too. It also recommends that the immediate and direct costs associated with the demerger are explicitly paid for by the state government. So how do we get the bill to pass? My office has done the work putting together the bill. I'm going to formally introduce it to Parliament and table it at the next sitting. That's coming up in a couple of weeks in November. But for it to pass, I need all of you. We actually need communities to be loud and clear with their local members, particularly with Liberal and Labor local members. They actually want this bill to pass. At the moment, it's supported by a handful of very diverse members of the crossbench, as diverse as Joe McGurr from down in Wagga to the recently independent former One Nation Rod Roberts. So it's got broad support in the crossbench, but this bill will not pass unless the government or the opposition decide to join us and pass it. And we have to show that this is still front of mind for all of these communities. And I think to some extent, enough years have passed since 2016. I think some people are probably hoping that it's been going on for so long and it's gotten so complicated that maybe people are a bit tired and used to it and will just move on and get over it. So it's so important for all of you, for people who live in those impacted communities, to make it very clear that this is something that you want, it's something that you need for local democracy, so that we can pass the bill.